the bridge between the previous album and this one is as a volume 2, and I found it interesting that you released an acoustic version of Sorry for Nothing on this one. But what also amazed me is that it was just as defiant as the fully plugged in version. It's like defiant, but with a little bit of vulnerability to it, which I thought was interesting. And I was curious, how do you see the two different versions of that song?
Well, I think the fully produced version is, obviously just adds a little more instrumental to it, if you will. But um, the acoustic version is more or less, you know, um, me singing directly to you because on tour, what I've been doing and thought it's been working out brilliantly. Is we have the full band show. It's big and loud. We play Outlaws and Outsiders, obviously the
Hmm.
big one, and but then I end the show with just me and the fans and Sorry for Nothing to promote the album. So and I remember making the set list for this year and thinking, let's try that out and see how that works. And it's just been going over so well. Did it on the Dorothy tour across the U.S. Did it on all the festival dates this summer,
Hmm.
um, and it just works very well. I think it's just two different versions, but and honestly, I think just that's what a great song can do, whether it's plugged in or just solo acoustic. It's still, as you said, defiant. It's still, that's got that profound meaning and story behind it, and that one to me is still a very special song.
Yeah, yeah. And then I don't know, it is interesting. I mean, I've seen other artists do it, but usually the typical thing is you end your set with something, really big.
The big one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But also not just in terms of how well it's known, but in terms of actual energy and volume and stuff.
Right.
And so it is fascinating when when you see an artist that just like, okay, I'm gonna go ultimate vulnerable, and it's just gonna be me and the guitar and
And a
all of
song.
you, for this last little bit. But yeah, I'm betting that has maybe more of an emotional punch sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it does for me too. Even though I'm the one up there singing the song, it's still I find it's a very special moment because it really people kind of like you mentioned it's very vulnerable. So it's just me, the guitar, the song, and everybody that cares to stay and listen. And I really feel like it's kind of for me it's a bit of a message for the fans in a sense of just me saying thank you, and
Hmm.
it's ending the show how it all started for me, which again is just me, the guitar, and a song, and hopefully a bunch more fans. So it's a special moment.
Yeah, yeah. And it's what I love about your story is the fact that you have defied being pigeonholed. Here you are. I mean, a lot of people put the country label on you, but you're touring with Theory of a Dead Man, you're touring with Sevendust and all these hard rock, and obviously it works with their fans,
Yeah.
as much as it works with yours. Um, and what I want to know is, how have you been able to avoid being boxed in, since that the industry you're in is all about, okay, we're going to put you in this little box, and this is you
Yeah.
and this is where you are, and you're not allowed to veer from that lane. I mean, I think the average music fan, it's like, okay, good is good, and it doesn't matter, what it gets labeled as.
Right.
But how have you been able to navigate it so that, the powers that be don't put you in that little box?
Well, it certainly isn't easy, and I think I probably make things a lot easier on myself if I just follow the rules. But I've always really believed in as not only a songwriter but as an artist. I mean, the words in there, art, and it's our job to create and tell our story and connect with fans and people through our story, our music, or our art rather. And I grew up on country music. I grew up on rock, and a lot of those bands that we grew up on, you don't really hear of or like that anymore. And it's meant a lot to me on both sides. So I, basically just tried to bridge that gap and mold those two genres or those two types of artists, whether it's Merle Haggard or Ozzy Osbourne, um, and kind of blend them together in my own way and tell my own story. Um, and
Hmm.
I've just tried to be consistent with that because it's two genres of music and many of these artists that I just really do love, and it's the kind of story of my life. I still listen to the same records as I did with Dad when I was a little kid. Nothing's changed because the music was so great, and they don't make them like that anymore.
Right, right. But what I also noticed, especially going through this album, Sorry for Nothing Volume 2, is there are sonically some interesting choices that maybe you wouldn't have heard on, let's say, a country album. For instance, with the song Are You With Me, there's this really great dark guitar tone that runs throughout that you wouldn't hear on a typical quote country song.
Right.
But to me, that's what makes it a little bit more interesting, a little bit different, a little bit more originally you. I'm curious, how did that particular addition evolve, that tone in that song?
Well, I think in writing the song, with the guys that I wrote it with, we kind of had an idea of, I guess if you will, almost a Nickelback like vibe, but with more of a um, country vocal and mostly in the verse parts, of course. But I think just having great great instrumentalists and great guitarists working with you, and me just kind of explaining what I want and how I want it, and I kind of just let them do their thing, and they just sure enough, you get some great sounds like that one, and I think knowing that I'm country and I'm rock, and working with, like I said, these great musicians, they kind of, it's the one thing that's really exciting is like in writing these songs. Actually, like I just got back from Nashville they were writing for 2 weeks, but the biggest thing, and going back to the box question,
Hmm.
being almost everybody that I write with, as soon as we walk, whether it's my co-writers for the last several years or new writes, it's like within 20 minutes we start talking, writing, or playing whatever, and then it's immediate like, wow, this is really refreshing from what we do every single day, and the same
Mm,
message, the same length, the same tempo.
yeah.
Um, leave it to Cory Marks to step in there and try to mess it all up.
Although, I mean, at least there is there is a slight blueprint isn't the word, but there are some people that have at least forged this path a little because that was the gist with the Zach Brown band is
Yeah,
the label tried to put them in, and they're like, no, if we want to play Enter Sandman in a show, we should be able to play Enter Sandman in a show. And so they, and they've got the chops, and they've, of course, become even bigger as a result. So, but
absolutely.
but yeah, I love that when you're listening to this song and it's like, oh, that's really cool. You wouldn't expect to hear that particular tone, but it really, it's just got this great dark sound to it. It's,
Yeah.
um, and then by the same token, the things you don't hear often, um, is for instance, the song Wild Ride. There's this wonderful, great stretch of solos in that, which you don't hear in recorded music a lot nowadays. Everything is
Yeah.
being, cut down and everything. So, how do all those solos, how did they evolve? Did that evolve through live performances, or did you just do multiple takes, or was it charted out?
Well, the producer on that song specifically is Kevin Churko, and um, he's just so great, and um, like again, going back to when I was a kid, you listen to like bands like Grand Funk Railroad and of course Rush, you know.
Hmm.
Um that's such a huge part of it. Excuse me,
Yeah.
is the music, and the solos, and um and it was, Kevin, really just brought this song to life after writing it, and we knew that we wanted it to be, it's country but it's got a rock feel, and we just want to let the boys play, and
Hmm.
so when I first heard it, like I said, I want some steel on there. I want, let's let them rip. And when we got that back, it was like, damn. Now, how cool would this be once we start playing it live?
Hmm.
First of all, I gotta grow my band a little bit because there's some extra instruments on there. But just what a fantastic song and way to introduce the band too. And I was always big on that, even as a kid. Like on the drums we have, and then
Yeah.
they get to do a little solo or whatever, and then everyone does that, and then they get back into the song that everyone loves, and just it's a moment. Definitely on the live aspect of it. But I've always built my albums like song structures. And I've said this so many times now, and I'm even looking at it. I remember building this one specifically, Volume 2. It's like, well, if I had these songs to play live, which order would they be in, and why?
Hmm.
Hence, going back to Sorry for Nothing, acoustic to end it all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
obviously, being the title track too, I just think it just adds that little, that extra piece of special to the entire album.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm old, but I grew up listening to albums and I still listen to albums, and
Yeah,
the flow and the order, is something that definitely resonates. And you for listeners like me, you want to be taken on a little bit of a journey.
exactly. A wild ride.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um and then you touched on it a bit. You started off as a drummer.
Mhm.
How did that influence you as a songwriter?
I think just melody and rhythm, right? You get a good feel when for me, anyways, when you hear a cool drum beat, or I mean, back then, I mean, I couldn't play guitar whatsoever, so I'd have them. I mean, I still can't play it all that well, anyways, but I have the ideas in my head where I could literally translate and I've done it I've done that before too in the studio where I literally basically vocalize a solo like, hey, can you do like a
Mhm.
whatever it is, because I can't play it but I know you can.
Right.
So I would basically sing the solo, and then they kind of translate it from their fingers to the guitar. But I think just rhythm and melody is always kind of, I guess, not to sound too corny or cliche, but been in my blood, since I was a wee little guy. So I think it just kind of comes naturally, really.
Yeah. And so many of your songs have that driving beat to it where, the drums are the engine, if you will, powering all the
Yeah.
song. Do you write the drum parts for a lot of your tunes?
Like basically have the basic foundation of what the rhythm's going to be, or because even in rights, I'm drumming and on my hands and knees while someone else is playing
Yeah.
guitar, right? And of course, Kevin Shirk was also a great drummer too. So that was one of the biggest things that we kind of connected on. In fact, I remember one of the ongoing jokes when we first started working together. He would tell me, I didn't sign you for your voice or your songwriting. Is when I researched you and I saw you do that one-handed drum solo thing. He's like, that's why I signed you. But so I think just again, just us both being drummers, we have a very good concept or idea of what and where the drums should be. Like I remember calling Kevin one time for my song Drive, and I said, there's this really cool part in the second verse where I want this do da, like this nice little kind of just
Yeah.
simple fill. And I remember I recorded myself in the mirror to show him what I was, and then he literally sent me the song the next day with that fill in it, and it was just
Nice.
like we got it, And so
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how some of that stuff comes together, but ultimately it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing like that, the fact that you can show him becomes this kind of shorthand language between the two of you where, you can just
Yeah,
this.
just drummers being drummers.
Yeah, yeah. Because yeah, it always fascinates me. Like I did interview with Kevin of Candlebox, and he started off as a drummer, and and he still he says it's still just kind of his mind goes there automatically, and it's interesting
Yeah,
how it influences like the power and the rhythm of a lot of these songs.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, and then you know as you because that makes me wonder also. There's the famous story of Dave Grohl learning to play guitar, and he still says, "I don't know what the names of things are. I know this is a G chord and that kind of thing." But he says
Yeah.
he plays guitar like a drummer, and he said, and so I'm wondering, as you have evolved into a guitarist, do you play from the perspective of a drummer?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like I still, I know that I probably strum harder than a real good guitar player would, but that's just how I've done it. And I guess, that same energy with the beat, where you're hammering down is kind of that same when it's hard to, I've always found that fascinating. It's like, well, how do these guys play so hard and whatnot but really when you hear these crazy solos, right, coming through the amps, it's like, man, that's badass. But if you unplug them or you hear them warming up, it's very, very light. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
they're not playing all that hard, right? It's
right.
the softer, more precision and whatnot, and then obviously the amps and pedals add this big boom effect. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so, and I was in preparation for this, I was reading some other interviews that you've done, and you talked about how, number one, the with every song, the it has to resonate with you emotionally, whether it's heavy, whether it's light. There's got to be
Yeah.
that emotional resonance. What I'm wondering is, like, what happens if you think of a really cool lyric, a nice turn of phrase, but it's not necessarily connected to an emotion immediately? Do you wait until you can apply it to, mentally some situation that happened to you, or, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I find whenever these lines, some of these lines and even the phrasing and whatnot, just they come from somewhere, and usually that's driven by some sort of emotion or experience that I've been through, and I've always been able to connect that way and try to put it down on paper as and with rhythm, um, as much as close as I can.
Mm,
Um, so I think it's just you know it's got to make sense for me first of all, because there's definitely times where I'm like, oh, this is a great hook or whatever, and you start writing it down, and then you start getting further down the song, and it's like, ah, you know what, it's not, I'm not, nah, that's not where I thought this was going to go. So sometimes
yeah.
it's best just to leave it for another day,
Okay.
or find a co-writer that can help you with it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you do these co-writing sessions, what do you usually bring to the table, and what do the other people usually bring?
um everyone's got their, plays their part, I guess you can say. And I'm
Yeah.
always definitely like, whenever you go, like, again, going to these rooms in Nashville, especially if it's the first time writing with me, it's like, all right, so you're like a rock guy, man. This is awesome. It's like, yeah, but we could also write a Haggard like song where you just want to cry.
Yeah.
And I like those too. It really all just depends on the day, because there's some days even, there's songs I really want to play. Let's say for live, it's like I really want to play them that day, but then the next day it's kind of like, man, I don't really want to play that one. So
Mm.
it's kind of it's an emotional roller coaster, and it's almost I always joke about this, where it's like, it's almost like a bipolar in a way, because it's like, well, I was really into it, just yesterday, but now today it's like, I take the song out, I don't want to play it, let's put it with something else. So it's kind of funny how that all works out.
And then when you're saying you don't want to play it, you mean as part of a writing session or as part of a set list? Like you'll just say,
Um,
I'm not feeling it today. We're not going with that one in the set.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, pretty much more on that side. But sometimes, that doesn't happen very often, and sometimes it's mostly once you get into it, and you can feel the energy from the people, from the fans too. Then it's like, oh yeah, that's why this is in here.
Yeah, yeah. And then another interesting bit I found in one of your interviews was you talked about you're hoping to do some touring of overseas next year,
Mhm.
and you said it was a dream of yours to tour Finland, which I've never heard from an artist before. And not to knock Finland, but I'm just curious, what is it about that country in particular that is like pulling you?
Well, I think in maybe the words were printed off differently.
Okay.
I've been to, because I played 8 countries this year, and the majority of those countries, I mean, there's Canada and the U.S. of course, but the rest are all overseas. Um, and it's Finland's also a big hockey country. like
Mhm.
Canada is.
Yeah.
Um, and if you remember the movie Mighty Ducks, well, they're from Iceland, but
Yeah.
kind of Northern Europe, But I've all, any European country really is just been a thrill, and a dream to, even just get to play it once. And
Mhm.
when we were over in Germany, it was, it's like I felt like, you know, it was crazy. It's to visit these places for the first times, and like filling out rooms and having radio and fans like know the songs and walking in the streets, and it's like, oh my, you're Cory Marks, it's like, holy crap, it's just crazy. It's and I felt so welcome over in Germany, the UK, London, Scotland,
Mhm.
and the Netherlands were great too. So it was like, it's, if I could do more of that, of course, anyone wants to play where they feel wanted too, right? That's
Yeah,
also a big
right.
thing as an artist. So that's, the coverage that I've gotten from countries like Finland and Sweden and stuff like that, they're just beautiful, beautiful places. So just to be able to step foot over there and do what I love, for people that are going to love it too, is just, it's an honor in that sense, and privilege too. So hopefully make my way across more European countries.
Yeah, yeah. And, as comes up in your bio, you are you a licensed pilot.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if you've ever come up with some really good lines or melodies while flying.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's, I can't really think of the specific songs right now, but there's definitely been times where I'm flying, and I write down a line or a title, or what, maybe even just a freedom, or a sense that I'm feeling up there sometimes. And so, a
Mhm.
matter of fact, when I'm done these interviews today, that's exactly what I'm doing, because it's been a few weeks. So I'll be going up to fly, and it's been really beautiful here, not a cloud in the sky. So I'll be going up at some point today, but I have to work first
Yeah,
before
right,
flight.
right. Yeah. And then, I find it fascinating because, I'm the guy who's white knuckling it on a 747. And, so was it always just, oh my God, I love this and I connect with, being up there? Or was it, just like you learned, you adapted to it? Or how did that love of flying evolve?
Well, there's certainly an adaptation, because you got to get used to the feelings and of flight, because it's not always smooth. And but especially if you're in control and you feel like you have enough knowledge and training for, for what's going on, then it's typically, it's you'll be all right. And
Yeah.
but for me, I've always just, we had a big air show in North Bay growing up, and it was actually the Heritage Festival. So, Saturday, Sunday from 12 to 4 p.m. was this one of the biggest North American air shows right at our waterfront. So there's thousands of people there, and there's jets, and it's just exciting. It's fast, it's loud, like a concert.
Hmm.
And then on the other side of the street, well, then there's this big stage, and then from 6 to 11, some of the biggest bands in the world are playing. So I kind of, I was really lucky to grow up on that and have that experience, to spend that time with my dad, and my parents at the waterfront for the air show, and then we go to a concert at night. So it was really, it was, the best weekend.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and then because I saw your Snowbirds video, which of course reminded me of Van Halen's Dreams video.
Oh, cool.
Um, and but the difference being no member of Van Halen was riding with the Blue Angels in that video. You were
Right.
in the plane with the Snowbirds.
Yeah.
And you know, was that, I mean, because that's some extreme flying. Was that the ultimate limit of what you've done in a plane or been involved with the plane as far as,
That
you
would
know?
be that would be the pinnacle, based on the skill and precision of what they, how they fly, and
Yeah.
of course the speed. I've been in S2 pits, the biplanes that do all the craziest.
Oh.
I've done that with a good friend Jason of mine, who I met just through online, as a fan, and then he came to my show just outside of Pittsburgh when I was out on tour with Theory of a Dead Man, and he says, "Well,
Mhm.
what hotel are you at?" And of course, we had a bit of a soiree after the show, and I get a text from him in the morning like, "Hey man, you're like a 5 minute drive from where the plane is. You want to go up?" And I'm thinking like, uh, a little nervous because I'm like, probably not in the best shape to be doing aerobatics. But I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to fly pits, and here's my opportunity. So go, just go do it. And it was such a great experience. We did loops, hammerheads, and
Oh,
snap rolls and stuff like that. And I think it was five and a half plus G and -3. Uh,
wow.
so it was about the same of what the snowbirds do pull at during an air show, which is +5 and -2. And I and but they do that at about 300 knots, so it's
Yeah.
a little bit faster.
I mean, is there any fear or is it all just, wow, this is a great thrill?
I mean, there's always a little bit of, nervousness because it's man and machine, of course. So,
Yeah.
you want everything to go as smooth as possible. But as you say, once the show starts, you're all in and just enjoy the ride.
Very cool.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. Well, I've already, kind of hit the time limit as far as that goes. And I'm just wondering, is there anything we haven't discussed that you want to talk about regarding your music or the new album?
No, I mean, I think that's everything. I mean, I always just let the interviewer, it's because some of these questions that you've asked, and thank you for them. They're also refreshing because it's different angle, and get to talk about something a little different, like the flying and certain, questions on the writing portion. So, um, I think we've covered everything, unless there's other questions that you had or anything lined up that we can go through.
um, let's see. I think I've had, I mean, those are all my prep questions. Actually, one other thing I was wondering is just because over and over it comes up in interviews about how you were influenced by Brad Paisley and his music,
Mhm.
and I'm curious, have you ever met or spoken with Ben, his drummer?
Ben Cesar, actually,
Yeah.
yes, I met him. He was playing in Sudbury. This is probably 6, 7 years ago. So he's playing about an hour and a half west of where I'm from. So actually, my dad and I went and saw him. And as a matter of fact, we went out back, and I knew the band, some of the band members that were opening for Brad Paisley, and we ended up kind of between buses and on the bus, as a matter of fact, on one of the buses. And I got to shake hands with Ben because I've always see, that's another perfect example on the musical aspect of it. There's a lot of great drummers, and sometimes that's what the music calls for, the song calls for, but it's pretty, just keep the beat kind of thing. But he's a fantastic drummer, and I know he's a Buddy Rich fan, which is, that's jazz. And but getting to see him live too, that's another example of introducing the band and stuff. When Ben starts playing, he's doing some really cool stuff that you don't normally hear in country music, and that goes without saying. Of course, like the Zach Brown band, there's a lot of similarity there, I find, when it comes to the music and live portion of the show. And I think that's really important, especially as a drummer, when you get to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Just because I haven't seen him in a little bit, but Ben's become a friend of mine, and we I love getting into these deep, philosophical conversations about drumming and stuff. And I thought of it, A, because Brad is an influence on you, B,
Yeah,
because for Ben, he's always said that Neil Peart was the beginning and the end for his own influence, and it's why he eventually switched to doing traditional grip.
yeah,
um and also, just there's, although Brad gets put in the country box, there's so many times there was a time, it was in the midst of one of their instrumentals live, they would switch into the solo section from Van Halen's Hot for Teacher,
Hopper
you
teacher,
know,
yeah.
and just Ben is, doing his Alex Van Halen thing and just ripping away at it. And it's just, I it reminded me of you and what you create, which is this great blend where it's like, yeah, never mind the labels. It's just it flows and it's great,
Yep.
And so it seems like the two of you would really lock in together.
Oh, I mean, that would be, yeah. My mom had all his records, and 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 those again just great songs, and he's a great musician too. So that's definitely would be a, would be a bucket list collaboration if I could partner up with Brad Paisley and his
Yeah,
crew.
yeah. And then, because you talk about, you got to be true to the song. It has to genuinely resonate with you. And I was listening because apparently the next single is going to be Whiskey River,
Yeah.
where I'm like, well, if this resonates, then he's had some interesting times in his past.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's different now. Obviously, been engaged for a couple years. Well, I guess yeah, 2 years now, or
Oh,
going on
awesome.
2 years. And we actually got I proposed at a Bryan Adams concert in Pittsburgh
Oh,
last March. Yeah, and but I'm not, let's just say she's still, God bless her heart, she still puts up with quite a bit from this guy. But it's when I wrote that with Craig Brooks, it's kind of, I was kind of going back on some past moments, and kind of just trying to create the story of, that good time and fun guy. But it's like, it makes him hard to love in one way or another. But as long as he's going down Whiskey River and having a ball, that's all that
yeah.
matters. So it's kind of, how it goes.
Yeah, well, it didn't seem like you went, too far over the bend, obviously, or you wouldn't be
No,
able to have a career. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's more of a good time and weekend type thing, and gotta 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 hop off the river and get back to reality.
right, right. And then, well, one more is, so I'm curious, because I know a bunch of guys in Nashville, and I know about the whole, Nashville writing scene, and the amazing amount of talent that's down there.
Hmm.
But I also wonder about like the intense pressure that comes with, okay, we're meeting for 2 hours, we're going to crank out something.
Yep.
Whereas it seems like, especially with writing music, some of it just has to be the muse whispering in your ear at times. It has to be, it just hits you. You can't necessarily call to it. So, how do you ensure that, these writing sessions are, as productive as possible?
Yeah, that's tough because I'm not really one to. I do it like even on this last trip with JT Harding and I we had we were together for 4 hours. We wrote two songs, and look back, I'm like, man, these are both really really great. Sometimes it just there's a connection, a vibe. Some days, it's like you sit there for an hour before you even come up with like an idea, or you go through certain ideas or ideas or hooks, um and it's like you just don't get it. And for me, I remember Willie Nelson mentioning something about like when it came to songwriting, where if you can't write the song in less than 2 hours, just leave it for another day,
Mm,
because it does have to, for me, I got to feel something. It's got to come, like straight from the heart, whether that's a party song, a sad song, or, whatever.
yeah.
And it's, and it's frustrating too, especially when you're writing every day. Cause it's like, you know what, man, I'm fried. I was kind of feeling like that on this trip because, I was writing every day, and some days were harder than the others. And then sometimes you kind of get halfway through the song and it's like, well, shit, we've been at this for 2.5 hours. I'm just like, I'm not really feeling it anymore. But you want to finish the song because maybe somebody else, in my mind, I always go, well, maybe somebody else will love it. Maybe you know, maybe Tim McGraw is going to want to cut this song if we do it right. So you
Yeah.
kind of got to put your head down and focus. But it does get tough at times. And like I said, I'm not really, and I, it's props to the guys that can go in and write every day, and Monday to Friday. But I've just never been those. Even when I try to be, it's hard because obviously, how many ideas can you come up with, and or
Yeah.
how many things when you try, you don't want to say the same thing twice in a different song and whatnot. And I always overthink that. So it's like, oh wait, I said that last Monday in this one song, so let's try to think of another line.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's sometimes like I think the biggest thing is too is like, based on how I write, it's like I got to go out and live and do, maybe it's a tour, maybe it's that proposal at the concert where I'm like, okay, I want to write this like, love song, a Bryan Adams love song,
Yeah.
one that everyone's going to want at the wedding, that kind of thing. So I think I write based like, as we talked about, I write based on life experience, and that's the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and yet you've been amazingly prolific. I mean, you came out of COVID with like 100 songs, as I read, and hence
Yeah,
became volumes one and two of
yeah.
his. And so I'm always fascinated by that. It's like because I do social media stuff for a bunch of bands, and one of the bands I've worked with is Sister Hazel, if you know them.
I've heard of them, but
Okay, and they have this song called Mandolin Moon, and I love it because the guitarist told me the story where he says they were doing a writing session, like the three of them, and they were just pounding away at this one song, and just it was nothing was moving, and so they
yeah,
said, all right, we're quitting, we'll come back tomorrow. And he just said, he's like, it shouldn't be this hard. What would I play if I just was playing for fun? And he came up with this lick, this melody, and then like took it to them and said, all right, I'm going to think about it overnight. You think about it overnight. And so it's like by finally just saying, screw it, they came up with this really cool
yeah,
tune, and it's like you almost have to force your way back into the fun of it all.
yep, yeah. And sometimes that's the best way is to, take a step back and give some space and breathe a little bit. The next thing you know, you go, oh, here's I know the hook.